What's up, meta nerds? This breakdown will pull from every resource available to completely understand the Bellator-class. Few vessels symbolize the ambition of the early Galactic Empire more vividly than the Bellator-class dreadnought, a rare, aggressive breed of capital ship born from the fevered dream of Imperial dominance, and remembered now more as a monument to Imperial overreach than a triumph of naval engineering. Kuat Drive Yards, that ancient shipwright responsible for the Venator and Imperial-class Star Destroyers, was already planning for the new era of naval warfare. The success of the Venator during the Clone Wars proved the value of large, flexible carriers, but the Empire envisioned something far more menacing. A vessel so massive, so heavily armored, that they could dominate entire sectors through its presence alone. And that's where we get the Imperial 1 class Star Destroyer. It was to be filled full of cheap ties, but even while they were being developed and became the backbone of the Imperial Navy, simultaneously, KDY was pushing for the development of a new generation of dreadnoughts. Among these experimental titans was the Bellator-class. It was designed to be a more mobile alternative to the Mandator series heavy dreadnoughts. It was to be powerful enough to crush fleets, yet fast enough to outmaneuver heavier contemporaries. Unlike the sluggish Mandator III, which while heavily armed moved like a lumbering fortress, the Bellator-class emphasized strategic mobility. Engineers affectionately referred to it as a fast dreadnought, a ship that could strike hard and reposition before an enemy could mount an effective counteroffensive. Production started in Kuat's secretive, high-security orbital yards sometime in the final years before the Battle of Yavin, with some stats putting it from 5 to 3 BBY. Though this was part of a process that started in 19 BBY, which was actually the last year of the Clone Wars. And though few in number, Bellators were deployed to key sectors where rebellion or external threats were expected, which would be those few independent sectors not already brought under Imperial rule. Their presence was as much psychological as tactical. Entire planetary systems capitulated upon seeing one of these immense dreadnoughts in orbit. At 7,200 meters, or nearly 4.5 miles long, the Bellator dwarfed the standard Imperial fleet units, and to put its sheer mass into perspective, it was over 6 times longer than the Venator, or 350% longer than the Imperial 1. Beam measurements are a bit shaky, but they put the Bellator around 2,880 meters, or about 1.8 miles at its widest point, which is 5 times broader than the Imperial class, which would only span 985 meters. While the Bellator's vertical height rose to roughly 1,100 meters, 3,609 feet, about 0.7 miles, meaning it would tower over both the Venator and Imperial vessels, whose command towers barely reached a third of that. Yet despite its massive frame, the Bellator sacrificed neither speed nor battlefield flexibility. Propelled by 14 massive ion drive engines, 10 primary and 4 secondary thrusters, the ship could achieve acceleration rates that stunned even experienced captains. We don't get actual numbers for this, but since most Star Destroyers are all hovering around 1,000 kilometers per hour, or 621 miles per hour, it must have been around 1,200 kilometers per hour in atmospheric speed, which would put it on par with a TIE fighter, and if that sounds insane, this is actually something that the Acclamator achieved during the Clone Wars, which was also seen as exceptional for its speed, so maybe with about 2 decades later, the Bellator could achieve something similar. In terms of firepower, the Bellator was built to impress. While it did not match the sheer battery count of more colossal Executor-class or the fearsome Executor-class Super Star Destroyers, as for its armament, it had 16 heavy dual turbolasers, 48 quad heavy turbolasers, 40 octuple barbette heavy turbolasers, 14 quad heavy ion cannons, 108 missile tubes, 288 light missile tubes, grouped into launchers with 24 tubes each, 142 medium quad turbolasers, and 1,568 light quad weapons, through a mix of ion cannons and laser cannons. And the Executor had 2,000 turbolaser batteries and another 2,000 heavy turbolaser batteries. And it all would have been supplemented by hundreds of point defense laser cannons and concussion missile launchers, all for intercepting starfighters and assisting in its anti-capital ship role. Armor plating several meters thick shielded the dreadnought's vital systems, and dual redundant shield generators provided layers of energy defense. And it was said among Starship engineers that a Bellator could absorb the combined broadside of an entire Mon Calamari battle group. They could bombard it for several minutes without a hull breach. A claim that, to be fair, was never fully tested in open battle, but it was accepted as plausible by both Imperial and New Republic analysts. Strategically, it filled an essential role envisioned by Imperial High Command. A second-line heavy striker capable of reinforcing fleets or smashing through enemy blockades with overwhelming force. Yet ironically, its strength may have also been its weakness. Few threats during the early Rebellion era truly warranted the deployment of a dreadnought of such scale, and their enormous operation costs, from fuel to crew demands, meant they were luxuries the Navy could ill afford once the Civil War began to stretch the Empire thin. In operational service, the Bellator remained largely in reserve fleets or high-priority sectors. During the Rebellion, some were stationed near core world industrial zones or critical hyperspace lanes. Had the Rebellion ever attempted direct assaults against these protected systems, it's likely Bellators would have been unleashed. Of course with devastating effect, but that's also why these things weren't directly attacked. There are some interesting stories compiled from New Republic records and some leaks from Imperial archives that tell of one Bellator vessel, originally named Imperator, which was captured and recommissioned into the fledgling New Republic under the name Heroes of Yavin. The ship was reportedly used during the cleanup campaigns following the fragmentation of the Imperial warlords. This would suggest that the Bellator systems were sufficiently advanced and modular to allow adaptation even outside the rigid standards of the Imperial Navy doctrine, which would be a rare trait for a ship this large. Still, the Bellator ultimately became a dead end in Starship design. After the Emperor's death and the Empire's splintering into feuding factions, few starships retained the capacity to support such behemoths. Many Bellators were scuttled, sold piecemeal to petty warlords, or lost in obscure skirmishes beyond the attention of historians. Unlike the Executor-class, whose infamy cemented its place in naval history, the Bellator was lost in its shadow, remembered only by veteran officers, starship engineers, and those who studied the old ways of Imperial might. To the few that might get a chance to glimpse one in the remote sections of the galaxy, seeing the signs of age take its toll may not pose the physical threat it once did during the Empire, but the very idea was unsettling to galactic citizens, was a stark reminder of a time when the galaxy trembled under the rule of Palpatine. So that's it for its breakdown, but as for behind the scenes facts, the design actually comes from a background vessel in Dark Empire 2, originally drawn by Cam Kennedy, but many of the images you saw in this video come from Fractal Sponge, who, if you don't know, has one of the most amazing stories of doing this on his own, just for his love of Star Wars, but it has been incorporated into official artwork. He actually gave it the name Bellator, which is the Latin name for warrior, and the images end up being used in the Essential Guide to Warfare. He has one of the greatest quotes to show how much he loves these things. Quote, "The design just looked so mean when I first saw it, like some very angry bear prowling the forest. The idea of a fast battleship/cruiser built to hunt destroyers and worry dreadnoughts, I kept the dagger shape narrow and long, since it gave a real sense of menacing speed to the whole ship." And he also compared it to the real-world ship, the HMS Vanguard, the British fast battlecruiser built during the Second World War. Even the Vanguard's real-world history maps on, and that it was being built during the war, but actually put into service from 1946 to 60. Just like how the Bellator started during the end of the Clone Wars, it would actually see service over the next decades. And the armament that I mentioned earlier is technically still not official, but it's what's given by Fractal Sponge, and since he made everything else about this ship so popular, I think it should be included. In a out-of-timeline appearance would be in the promotional video made for the Old Republic. There's a shot of a Sith Star Destroyer, which is meant to be the Harrower class, but it's actually showing a shot of the Bellator. So that's it for the breakdown. Please hit that like button, I really need your help. Comment your thoughts and suggestions, but most important of all, remember, please hit that like button, it's the best way to help me out. Comment your thoughts and suggestions, and check out these other videos, I'm sure you'll like them, but most important of all, remember, the Force created the light and dark just so that this struggle could produce amazing ships. And the Force will be with you. Always.